Hi, this is Dave. I'm one of the interpreters here at Henricus Historical Park, and today we are in our English Planters Barn. This is actually a building that we haven't been using a whole lot in recent years, so we've been cleaning it out, getting it reset, so you can actually come in here and view it when you're visiting the site. And this is an example of a typical planter's barn that you would find back in England in the early 1600s. These types of structures would be built here in Virginia, but typically they're eventually going to be used for the housing of tobacco. Now here, or back in England I should say, they would typically house things like grain, hay, different types of animal forage. They would also sometimes actually house animals in these barns, so that's why we refer to it as a planter's barn. Purpose-built tobacco barns are not really going to be built here in Virginia until kind of getting more into the mid to late 17th century when they start building barns that are built on stilts. They have different venting in them, different ways of curing the tobacco, because that'll be the primary purpose of the structure. But early on in the colony, this is typically going to be a general purpose barn. So you will continue to keep things like hay, grain, forage, and other agricultural tools and various things that you need. But here in the colony, tobacco is going to be the primary crop. The English will start growing tobacco in Virginia between 1612 and 1614. By 1614, it's really going to start to take off as a primary crop, and everybody's going to be growing it. A typical farm might grow only 2 to 3 acres. Some of the larger farms can grow several dozen acres if they have enough different laborers to actually work that land. It is a very labor-intensive crop. Usually 1 acre you can grow anywhere from about 4,000 to maybe up to 5,000 plants. So it's a lot of plants on an acre, a lot to produce and a lot to take care of. Usually 1 adult man can take care of an acre. So typically if you're producing about an acre of tobacco, you would put that in the ground probably about mid-May each year and let that grow. And then by about mid-August it's going to be ready to harvest. It will get about 9 feet tall before you actually top the plant. Topping it is going to be cutting the flowers off the top so that you're encouraging the leaves to grow broader and larger. And once you've actually harvested that crop, it will be brought in and hung in the barn, typically on switches. So you will see in the rafters here that we do have some of our previous year's crop hung on switches in the top to dry. Typically you would have a lot more hanging in those rafters. You're going to put as much as you can in here, and you'll let it cure and age for about 2 months. What you want to do is get something that is fairly supple and leathery, kind of a dull brown color, and once it gets to that point, you know it's ready to take down. So after about 2 months, you'll pull all those leaves and stalks down, and you'll start packing them into hogsheads. So we do have some hogsheads over here. Over time, hogsheads will get much larger. They'll typically hold about 1,000 weight of tobacco, but early on you'll use any typical barrels that you can find, and you can pack a very large number of leaves in there. Usually you might have some of the children working a farm actually climb in there and start packing those leaves in, kind of pressing them down. Eventually they'll build a tobacco prize, and the tobacco prize will be used to kind of help put weight on the barrel and compress as many leaves as you can into that barrel. Those barrels will then be rolled down to the nearest inspection station, or they might be collected by a local merchant who's actually collecting it along the riverfronts, and eventually it will be assessed and processed and taken back to England for sale. So that's kind of the process of producing tobacco. And we do produce tobacco here at Henricus. We grow Orinoco every season. And again, that's some of what we had up in our rafters. So we usually will cure it, dry it, and try to process some finished leaves that would be typically used. And we do other things in this barn as well. So when you come in here, you'll notice that we have, again, a lot of agricultural tools. We have a flax break. So for instance, processing flax to make linen would be a typical activity. We have actually tobacco seeds and pods that we're hanging and drying from last year's crop, and we'll use those to plant again this year. And we have other things like tools over here. Typically you're going to have a lot of good tools in order not only to work your farm and build the different structures you need on a farm, but to do typical carpentry work, things like that. So these are all different activities that we do in our barn here, amongst other things on the working plantation site that we have. So please come out sometime and see some of the work we're doing. Thank you.